What's going on, guys? Isaiah or /Buddy24 here, bringing you another video here today on Ancient. And in this video, I'm going to be kind of running through the map, doing a bit of a map overview here, and bringing you some callouts. Now that Ancient is in the competitive map pool, it's obviously important to know some of the callouts on the map. But it being a brand new map made by Valve, there obviously aren't sort of standardized callouts just yet. So I'm going to be kind of just running around the map, going over the various callouts on the various positions. But it's important to keep in note, kind of like I just mentioned, there isn't, 100% concrete callouts for this map just yet, at least compared to the other maps. So none of these positions that I'm going to be naming are necessarily like what everyone might call something. I'm sort of basing this callout video on a few different callout maps I've seen on Twitter and on Reddit, and then just sort of adding in my own opinion and advice. But I think in general, it's important to note that for any map, you don't want to have a lot of very specific callouts. You want to kind of have like standardized callouts between maps. On every map you always have like a long and a short, a pit, a triple box. But you don't want to have too many positions on a map that are sort of map specific. So an example is like banana on Inferno, or what's another example, like palace on Mirage. You want to just have sort of these same words used on multiple maps. But with the new map Ancient, it's kind of hard to do that, as there are some sort of unique locations throughout the map. We'll kind of get into that, but in general, I just kind of want to mention this at the start, that these are not set in stone callouts, and they are certainly ones that you want to kind of use between maps. If you are going to use callouts for a map that you don't really know, you don't want to use like extremely specific callouts, just because it's a new map in the pool, and you want to kind of keep some of the callouts sort of similar between maps. So without further ado, let's jump right into it here. We are in, of course, the CT spawn to start out with. We have this new area that was recently added into the map, connecting the CT spawn into the A site. And I've seen a lot of people call this Temple, and I think that's a pretty good specific callout on the map. If you're going to have at least a few specific callouts on a map, I think having it for this new tunnel is good. I've seen some people want to call this Elbow, but I think Temple is pretty good, as there are a couple other things that could be potentially called Elbow throughout the map. In terms of this A site itself here, we obviously have some of the new additions to the A site. We have these boxes here that it's called Triple. I think that's a pretty standard one on most maps, so that one is Triple. We have just, of course, just Site. If you were to say just Site, you would probably be meaning like the bomb planting zone here, this little yellow square. Then we have Big Box here, just one lone box, so we call this Big Box. And then we have Back Plat. A lot of maps similar to, like, Dust 2 has a back plat. What else has a back plat? Cache sort of has a back plat as well. This is just plat. You could maybe call this plat box, but in general, I think if you say plat, they're going to know what you're talking about. And then we have this little spot up here, which is called boost. You can no longer get to it solo, but if you were to fly up here and be boosted by a teammate, you would call this boost. Or down here, just below the boost, you would just call this under boost. Important to kind of know the distinction between that. If you're calling boost, but he's down here, you want to just say under boost. So those are kind of the callouts on the A site. There's not a lot going on here, as you might imagine. We also have this sign here that you could call sign, but I think in general, like, no one's going to be sitting like right here, just in the open, exposed from a lot of angles. So in general, we have Triple, Big Box, Plat, Temple, and of course, like, CT spawn, alley, and then boost and under boost. Over here towards this little area here is called, I think just A main is good, or A halls. I think if you just say A main, they're going to know what you're talking about. There isn't going to be like specific callouts for every little nook and cranny in this little A main, A halls area, so like this for example. But I think just calling this entire from there basically to here, they have it main hall here on the Valve thing, but just A main or A halls is pretty good. If we move over here to the other side of the other entrance, people have been calling this Donut, and Donut has recently received a little update, which made it a lot smaller of a donut, making this sort of room a little more open, not as many, tight, little slim angles here. But I do really like Donut for this little area. You could also just call this like A short, if this would be like A long, but I think just calling this Donut is kind of nice. It is kind of like a circle room, so I think Donut is pretty appropriate for this one. If we work our way back over here to the A main or A halls area, we're going to move into now like the sort of T side of the map. We have this sort of large open entire area here, and people have been calling this Yard. I also think Jungle is a decent callout, but I suppose since the entire map is a jungle, Yard is probably decent. Just sort of one of the areas on the map that's very open and empty. Not a lot really going on here. So this is sort of yard. Obviously, once you get to down in here, you would just call this T-spawn or water. I think water could also sort of progress into this area here. This whole area kind of covered by water. We're going to leave B site here just for a second. But in general, nothing really specific over here. It's just sort of T-spawn or water. And then this is like the entire area from, you know, down here, over here, over here. They have it called as outside, but I think just yard or outside works pretty well. And then let's move into now the middle area of the map. We have obviously the T entrance to mid. And I think that should honestly just be called bottom mid or just T mid. It doesn't really need any sort of specific callouts for like these little cubbies. But I think just T mid or bottom mid works pretty well. We obviously have these boxes here in mid, which I think could just be called Xbox, like on Dust 2. Or you could just call it mid box. I guess really any map that has a middle box is kind of just called Xbox. Mirage is another map that has a box at middle, and that's just kind of called top mid. So this can still just be middle or Xbox. In terms of these sort of CT areas of middle, we have this big cubby in here, which some people have been calling pit. But when I think of pit, I think of something like Inferno A site, or you know, Dust 2 Long, that big driveway pit. So I kind of like mid cubby for this a little bit more. There isn't really a ton of cubbies in mid. You know, this isn't really a cubby. This is like the Xbox. This is sort of a cubby, but this is more like bottom mid, T mid, like I mentioned. So I kind of like mid cubby for this. I guess there isn't really another spot that you could call pit on this map, so pit could also work. But I just think this other little additional like alley thing that you can walk on top. I think mid cubby, you're gonna kind of know this huge big cubby is mid cubby. In terms of over here, this is still just kind of donut. You would just probably call this still donut side, or just like a short side. And then if we go up in here, we of course have just the CT side of mid. And this room is called red. I've seen a lot of people calling this red, which obviously kind of makes sense. It's really the only room on the entire map that isn't like a gray stony color or like a green stony color. So I think red works really well for this. And then of course this room in here can just be called mid doors. You have the classic, you know, sort of mid doors that you have on a lot of CSGO maps. And so I think just in general, if you're down here on the T side, and you have, you know, you're coming into mid, you could just call it mid doors, or just, you know, upper mid, or just red. And I think people are kind of going to know what you are talking about. So that's the first half of the map basically done. We're going to move over now to the B side of the map. There isn't really a specific call up for sort of this area. I think if you're over here, you're still like in mid doors. And if you're over here, you're going to probably just kind of call this still like spawn, CT spawn kind of thing. So not really a ton to really call in this particular area. But I think once you get to here, you can start to come up with some callouts. You could call this like CT box, because there's like, this is like the only box that's really on the CT side of the B site. And then once you get way over into here, you could kind of call this like, people have been calling this, you know, little structure square. I think you could just kind of call this like back square. There's obviously two paths into the B site from the back square. And this particular side is called stairs. I've seen a lot of people calling this stairs. You obviously have, you know, the like stone temple steps here. But I think to distinguish between like this area and this area over here, we're going to kind of want to call this one stairs. You could also call this like B long, I guess. And you could call this area over here B short. But they're kind of like the same length. So I don't really know if that is a solid idea, but I was seeing some people calling that on Twitter and Reddit. But I think in general, if you just call stairs, you're going to know that like this is basically going to be stairs. CT playing on stairs. And if they're like, you know, pushed way back here, just kind of back square. And then over here, either, you know, B short or like, you know, short square or something. Just something to kind of separate this and this. You know, if you're just calling back sight, they're not really going to know what part of the back site you're talking about. What do they have this as? They have this as alley. So I kind of just like stairs or B long for this area, and then like, you know, square alley, B short, just something to kind of differentiate this area and this area. In terms of the site itself, we of course have, you know, just pillar. That's the really only call out on the actual site. And then this little corner over here, which is not going to be super common in my opinion, except for maybe like post plant positions, is just called wood. It's, you know, you can spam the wood through the other side, of course, and there's a lot of other, you know, sort of stony areas. So this is kind of just like wood. Down over here is where the T's run up. sort of similar to like if you're doing like a mid B split on Dust 2. I mean, this is kind of just called B ramp. You have it, it has it just here as ramp. But I think if you're gonna call this B long and this like B alley or, you know, square alley, this is just a ramp, pretty straightforward. Move over here to the T side of B. This entire area is just kind of called, you know, either scaffolding or construction. You obviously have the wood, little cubby here on the other side of this. But I think if you're over here, you're in like, you know, B doors, you know, more wooden doors here. Then you're into B ramp. But if you're over in sort of, let's say, on top of this thing, or you're over here, you're kind of just in construction. Construction is like a call out on overpass and, you know, vertigo, for example. So I think having the word construction is pretty good. Then you come over here to the sort of T side of mid from the other side. I still think you could, this is sort of like a construction or just boxes area. People have been calling this like a window, but there isn't really like a traditional window like you have on like Mirage, for example. So I don't know if a window is the best call out for here. They have it as T side upper, which is just a terrible call out. I think if this is going to be construction and scaffolding, either this can be like just window, or, you know, like mid boxes. You have like X box, which is just the one box, and then the mid boxes. Probably window is actually, now that I think about it, a bit of a better call out here. You have like your, you know, T mid, your bottom mid, and then you have your window, and then your mid doors. And our last little area over here is this sort of indoor area with a little sort of cave area with a little temple under construction. I'm not exactly sure what to call this little area, as I found this is the area that sort of everyone calls something different. I think calling this just like a cave is pretty good. There isn't a lot of, you know, indoor areas. At least on the other side you have like the donut and just the A main or A halls. Over here you don't really have anything super distinguishable other than just like these little like doorways. So I think just calling this cave is fine. Maybe like this is cave. I saw people call this cheetah because of the, you know, cheetah artwork on the wall. I also saw people call this dig or dig site because there's like the dirt little thing going on over here. But I think cave or cheetah. Maybe this one will take a little bit more time to sort of come up with a concrete call out. But I think just like, even if you call this whole area cave, you're probably fine. Maybe if you call this area cheetah, and then you call like this either like connector or like just cave, and you have either your like cave or connector box. I think any one of those will definitely do. Sort of hard to get a call out for these areas, as there isn't like a distinguishable feature other than this basically like this like cheetah mural or whatever. But really, as long as people know what you're talking about, you should be fine. Again, just to kind of remind you, we have like, you know, construction and scaffolding. Probably just construction is fine. Window over there, and then we have cheetah. And then we have either just cave or like B connector. And then of course you have the little B box. There's only like one box on B other than this back box. That's more of like a CT box. This is more of a like cave box or a B short box. So anyways, yeah guys, that's basically going to do it for the callouts on Ancient. I know there's obviously a lot to sort of take in right there. And if you want a more like visual piece for this, rather than just watching an 8-minute callouts video, you can check out the links below. I'm going to link the Twitter links and Reddit links to some of the callouts that the community has made, these sort of callout visualizations. Just something that we're going to have to get used to. It's obviously a brand new map. The callouts are not refined just yet. But I think in general, most of the callouts on Ancient are pretty basic, and you can keep them very simple and straightforward, very clear and concise, and that's kind of what you're looking for the callouts on a map, especially a new map. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and as always, I'll see you guys soon.